Sorry, you expected something from me.
I mean,
Yeah. Woo. Ooh. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another pre-Thanksgiving special of Third Degree, the podcast, episode number 86? 87. Damn it. I'm off by one. Hi, I'm Peter, and with me are my two buddies that I love to talk all things Football Club Dallas. First, I don't even know if he's used to this yet, this Thanksgiving thing, our English friend, Dan Crooke. Dan, do you do Thanksgiving?
No, not really.
Yeah,
No.
I didn't think
I was
so.
going to say, you ruined my thing. I was going to say I'm calling in from New York City at MLS HQ, where they're in the fourth day of rioting since everyone that wrote a story on the MLS Cup playoffs forgot that FC Dallas was taking part.
Well, is there anybody left at MLS HQ to write a story since they fired so many people this week?
Hey, Don Garber goes under many names here.
Okay, all right. And I don't think Doyle's going to write one, or we to be. All right, and then, of course, your hero, my hero, everybody's hero, the good, the one, the only editor, founder, thirddegree.net, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Hey, Peter, happy Thanksgiving. That seems like a good occasion to mention that if you like what we do, support us on patreon.com/third degree. Thanks to everybody that does, because they make this happen.
Are you thankful for your Patreon subscribers?
Oh, my gosh, yeah. In this time of COVIDness, yeah, I'm very thankful. You have no idea.
Gosh bless the Patreon subscriber. Okay. Well, I assumed that we were going to come into this. I woke up this morning thinking, we're going to record the pod a day early, and we're going to talk about Dallas's big surprise in Portland and what's now happening going on. And then suddenly, in the biggest, most extreme Huntsman drop yet by Buzz Carrick, the breaking news that Buzz let everybody know earlier today, it appears that Bryan Reynolds is about done as a Huntsman, and as none other than Juventus has got a giant Brinks truck backing up to Frisco to shell out some money for our young right back that we just got used to seeing for the team. Buzz, why don't you let everybody know what's up?
Sure. Well, a slightly funny story about that is I was putting it all together during the middle of Lucci's conference call today, so I was only half listening to Lucci talk. But but basically, as well as anybody else that has watched Bryan Reynolds play since he took over for Reggie Cannon, it's pretty obvious that the level is really high and that the potential is even higher. So since that happened, basically every single week there'd be more teams that would be coming in and watching and more interested, particularly European teams. And there's probably been 20 different teams that have come in that I've been told about that have expressed some level of interest. And then as time went on, it got whittled down as where lots of teams are still interested, but there are certain teams that came to the front in terms of here's how much money we're going to pay you, here's how much money we're going to come in and offer. And a couple of days ago, there was a couple of teams that seemed like they were pretty set to come in at about 4 or 5 million. And then today, Juventus came in, with their number somewhere between 6 and 7 million. And not just the number, but with the attitude of we're Juventus and we have more money than you. And if anybody else tries to come in, we're going to come in bigger. So they really want this kid. And they appear ready to back it up. There are some other teams that are still in there, that are still trying to get in there, so we'll see what happens. And now, just like it did with Reggie, once these things get to this stage, they still take some time. You have to work out all the parameters, and the two teams have to, hammer out the exact details and so on and so forth. And FC Dallas is going to try and get a sell-on percentage because that's what they do, and that could affect the final number some, I suppose. But the kid's not going to be here past this playoffs. He's going to be gone this window. All these teams that have come in are 100% looking for now this window. So even if for some reason the Juve part falls apart and one of these other teams gets it done, he'll be gone and he won't be playing here past the playoffs. And on a side note to that, a lot of credit to the kid because this has all been going on this whole time, including in the playoffs, and he's still playing really well in a level-headed manner and doing the job that they're asking him to do, which is sometimes defensive, sometimes offensive. And it's not getting to his head, and he's not, doing some bad things on the field, trying to show off or whatever. So it's a fascinating situation, and it's not done yet, but Juve, the leader in the clubhouse, and is coming in pretty heavy with what is pretty good money for a guy who's played 14 games for FC Dallas.
All right, so I think a really good question to answer, because I've seen this on social media since you broke the word. Lots of surprise about this news, not just the fact that it's Juve, but the amount of money, and then in comparison to the fact that Reggie ended up going for almost 3 times less than this, and ended up playing on a team in Portugal. So what are the differences between Reggie and Bryan, and why would Bryan, who's only been playing professionally at this level for a very short period of time, suddenly appear to have so much more value and immediately end up at a much bigger club?
Well, first, Reggie's number went down a little bit because of COVID. I thought he would be 3 to 3.5, and it went down a little bit because FC Dallas wanted, again, the sell-on percentage, as they always do. So as for why
don't you just real quickly explain sell-on percentage for anybody listening that doesn't understand that premise, please?
Okay, it happened. It's something with FC Dallas once, and it happened with Chris Richards. It happened with Reggie Cannon. They want a percentage of any money if the club they sell him to then sells him on. So basically, they're betting that the player is going to be successful. They're betting that Boavista will then sell him to Lille, and so that there's going to be a bigger fee, and they want a percentage of it. They're betting that Richards is more likely to be sold than he is to become a full-time starter for Bayern. So they're giving up a part of their sale at the time for a percentage of any hypothetical future sale. So I'm sure that they'll want the same thing with Reynolds. I'm not privy to the Dallas thinking on this, but I can imagine it will be the same. So as for why Bryan's fee is essentially twice what Reggie's is, it's partially because of age. It's partially because of how long Bryan has been a pro. It's important that Bryan's been a pro and training in a pro environment and doing everything a pro does, and not a college kid and not an academy kid. There's a significant difference there. So Bryan's been a pro for 4 years, and that's important already. And more specifically, Reggie is a solid defender, a good defensive fullback, but when he goes forward, that's part of what still needs development. There was, in fact, an interview with the head of Boavista that was on, I think it was on MLS's website the other day, where they talked about that's what they're working on with Reggie, is the decision-making going forward and having to be more impactful. Well, Bryan's a converted attacker. He's a winger. He's a forward who is now playing defense. So he's learning to defend, which you can do. But attacking is so often, individual attacking skills are instinctive. So we've talked about this before, too, with players in regards specifically to Paxton Pomykal, for example. European teams have a bunch of dudes that can defend. They got a bunch of dudes that can dribble and play ball and play in the center of the park. What they don't have is 6'3" guys who can fly down the wing and attack. So the reason he's worth twice as much money, and it could have been more, by the way, I'll tell that story in a minute, is that people look at Bryan Reynolds, they think, could this guy be Alphonso Davies? Now, of course, right now, no, he's not even close. But they look at the potential, they look at the upside, and they're willing to roll the dice and pay this higher level of money on that potential, that attacking flair, that ability to get forward, that ability to run the line the entire game at a high level with pace. Not that Reggie's slow, but there's a difference when you combine the size and the pace and the flair that elevates his price.
Dan, are you surprised or taken back by the news today?
No, it was like Buzz says. This is the kind of player that everybody wants. That as we go from more of a defensive first fullbacks into the attacking fullbacks that seem to just generate money in Europe. And MLS is going to be the new hunting ground. It's where Brazil used to be the place to pick up guys for cheap. Now suddenly everyone's 20, 30 million, and every other untapped market is, and now it's MLS's turn.
So, Buzz, you intimated a second ago that you thought Bryan could have been sold for more than the reported 6 to 7 million that you put online today. What's that about?
Well, FC Dallas has, in hindsight, misplayed this a little bit, and it has to do with how much they're paying him now versus what they could have paid him, and how much that means he costs to transfer. We've been talking about, from watching him in training for about 2 years now, we've been talking about he was ready to get some playing time. And then last year, they did not give him playing time. They gave it to Brisson. And then this year, they started negotiating with him, and they ended up giving him a new deal that is a incentive-laden deal. So it's got a smaller base and a higher incentive laden level. But even combined, it's only about half what Paxton and Jesus got. Now, in FC Dallas's defense, you are talking about a right back. They don't spend a lot of money at right back in their paradigm and their salary structure. Bryan at that point had not played very much, so there's a give and take there. But the fact that they didn't come in and give him a more of a guaranteed contract, less of an incentive-laden contract, and a little bit more than they did give him. So he's a little, in hindsight, compared to what he's about to sell for, he's a little underpaid in that context. Because if you would have paid him that more robust salary, not even in the Paxton territory, just more of like $300K a year guaranteed instead of 150 plus bonuses that could get to 300K or whatever, it would have meant that you could have demanded a higher sell price because it shows the value you have in him. So these things are all give and takes. So if you'd have given him, or anywhere between where he was and what Paxton has, you probably could have asked for more like 10 million than you could have what I thought he would have gotten, which was about 5. So just a slight misplay there. It's hard to really claim that they've screwed it up completely because they're about to sell a guy for £7 million or dollars,
right.
Excuse me. But
or euros or whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is. I think it's $7 million, $6 to $7 million, depending on what it actually comes in. And if they get some competition, it could change. And then of course the sell-on could change it. But the idea being that if they would have been more not faithful, if they would have had more faith in Bryan and gotten him playing a little bit earlier and paid him a little more solidly, then this price would be higher. So it's not a massive misplay. It's just a little bit misplay.
So did we ever find out why they didn't? Yeah, because I remember being on the pod last season and complaining about the fact that they were playing Brisson when they needed to rest Reggie instead of Bryan and not understanding why.
Well, I have 2 theories on that, and I do think there's a little bit of pressure not to ruin Reggie's price, because if you'd have made it clear that you had this gangbusters guy coming up, someone might have not given you as much money for Reggie possibly. So that's okay. I don't know that to be true. That's just my assumption. And the second part has to do with Lucci's nature. He seems much more willing to play a kid and roll the dice in an attacking role, Pepe, Jesus, Paxton, than a defensive role. We didn't see Reynolds play. Brisson filled in for him. Montgomery hasn't played. Nelson hardly plays, only when they really have to. He seems a lot more reluctant to play defenders that are young. I suppose because of so much of team defending is about experience and playing in a system and that kind of thing. But those are just my theories as to why they didn't. I think they've made a big mistake. For one thing, he for sure should have gotten those 5 games last year Brisson got. But even this year, you've known for a year and a half that Reggie was leaving, and you didn't get Reynolds ready. So like when Reggie finally actually left, you hadn't given Reynolds any games, and so you had to go with Brisson for a couple of games and try and wean Bryan in, when you should have, from the beginning of this season, you should have given Reynolds maybe every third or fourth game, you should have put him in. Not to say that he's going to take Reggie's job, but just to sort of get him going. I mean, pick and choose what games maybe. But they should have had him more ready to go than they did.
Dan, your perspective as somebody who grew up in a different country, and by and large, your native players, as they grew up through their systems, just stayed within England. But on the, I guess what I'm asking is, from your perspective, what is the significance of somebody of Bryan's age and from being from the United States getting purchased by, of all places, Juventus?
Yeah, I think any global scale club attracts better standard of coaching, better standard of training, and just the chance to realize that potential. don't want to sound like too much like Lucci, but getting players out of their comfort zone is such a huge deal. Certainly, I do appreciate when you get guys like Jadon Sancho going to Germany just to get out of the whole notion of, well, he's English, he has to play in England, and he has to speak English, and he has to never leave like the little surrounds he grew up in. Get these guys uncomfortable, get them some real life experience. It's great. It's going to be, I don't always appreciate the notion of, they have to go to Europe, they have to play in whatever crappy 12th division in Belarus that will make them better than MLS. That's not accurate. There are several leagues that will, and Serie A, particularly with Juventus and the facilities they've got, the coaches they've got, the players that he can learn off. That's definitely one of those opportunities that just doesn't present itself very often.
And the other thing to consider is that after some initial kind of bonks on homegrowns, Kellen Acosta and Ruben Luna, some other ones that just didn't, or even, to that degree, Mauro Diaz, or things that, in the plans and the works were supposed to generate a lot of revenue for the club that just didn't turn out that way. They are on a bit of a run at this point.
Well, I think there's been an evolution with the FC Dallas Academy. From the beginning of its founding to now, they've, of course, improved over time. The first versions of the team were very local, but now there's players from all over the United States and even foreign players in their academy. So there's a much broader pool from which they're drawing. So I don't think there's any question that the level of talent that's coming out of the academy is higher, of course, every year, that it gets better every year. There's a little bit of a lull right this minute because they've signed 2 or 3 guys already, but down the line, again, there's going to be these big classes coming with more and more talent. So there's also a slight change in terms of recognition of what is appealing in terms of sale. It's this idea that I talk about a lot, that it's like, what do we have that they don't have? And it's the size and the speed. Listen, you got to be able to play. I'm not saying these are guys that can't play, but look at this, like guys like Chris Richards and Bryan Reynolds and Weston McKennie. It's guys that have not just the ability to play, but the power and the speed and the size to go with it. So you can see that it manifests itself in a guy like Justin Che, for example, who has a German passport, by the way. A guy. So that's another reason why. Yeah, that's the reason why they accelerated his signing, because of that German passport through his mother's family. It's the what do we have coming out of the academy that other people might covet, and that's a guy that we want to sign, rather than like a guy that we could bring through North Texas perhaps, or maybe wait until he's maybe played a year or two of college. That's going to be an MLS player in a longer run. So there's been a little bit of a change too in that aspect, I think. So. It'll be interesting to see them having missed on some guys in the last 5 years. It's not just Weston. There's this kid, Charlie Kelman, who's at South End, was at South End, is now at QPR. There's the kid that's at Norwich, who was with FC Dallas and then was Solar and then went over there on his own. So, time to time they miss out on guys, and no one has a 100% record. But lately, I think they've done a better job of IDing the kind of guys that are going to appeal overseas. And Reynolds is for sure one of those guys. And I think Che is going to be one of those guys down the line.
Well, it is a significant moment in the history of this club for something like that to happen, especially on the heels of the Reggie deal and the Chris Richards deal. It just continues to set this system and this academy up as being the place in the United States that kids are going to want to bring the best talent to, because it's the one that consistently, now at least, is putting players on a path to a pro career, not in the United States, but over in Europe. And that's, if Paxton, for example, ever gets his health thing screwed together and puts a performance for even a half season in, I mean, you could see Paxton coming back at the beginning of next season and playing so well and having to do with the Olympics and everything that he's gone by July.
Yeah, if he's healthy, and the Olympics will be huge for that. And Olympics is a big place, and the U20 Worlds are too. Not that he would be in that because he was in it last time. Those tournaments are big tournaments in terms of scouting and looking for players that can elevate when they're against a higher level of competition and they're in a pressure situation. Can you elevate? So it's entirely possible that Paxton could come out of the back of the Olympics, or anybody else. I mean, Philippe is a good example of that as a keeper if Dallas does buy him. Mm-hmm. You know, anybody that makes it into those Olympic teams, if the U.S. makes it to the Olympics, of course, that's a big part of that. You know, you're going to expose yourself to these international scouts, and you can make a leap. You know, I mean, Jesus is still involved in those national team pools too. So those opportunities to showcase yourself are big. And Paxton, we know, is a special player in terms of like his ability to impact the game. You know, and that definitely has a value. Now, is he going to go for $15 million to Manchester United? No, he's not, because he's 5'6". But you know, there's definitely a potential for him there to make a jump to Europe, just as there are any of these top tier talents that are signed out of the academy as teenagers. Those guys all have the potential to be European players. Those are the guys that are not going to stick around for more than a couple of years. No guy that's good enough to sign is like 16, 17, 18 years old is going to play 15 years in MLS. That's just not going to happen. Those guys are too good.
Wait, Paxton's taller than 5'6", isn't he?
I think he's about 5'6" in reality. I think they list him at like 5'8", but
gosh, nope, they have him. They split the difference on the roster. They're saying 5'7".
Yeah, he's not 5'7".
Okay.
I don't know. He ain't that short.
He's pretty short.
How tall are you, Dan?
6 even.
Are you 6 feet tall?
Yeah.
I would have never guessed that. I thought you were... No, never mind. Okay, so, well, congratulations. Well, I guess the big thing, we just want to say the caveat, right, Buzz, and I think you said this earlier, is this is not anywhere near a done deal. Lots can mess this up. Lots can change.
Yeah.
These are all just kind of the initial reports coming in from people that you've been talking to.
Yeah, this sources are people that are, you know, around and involved in the negotiations, and this is the first big offer that's going to come in. You know, it probably will take a week or so for the offer to actually be communicated, give or take, something like that. Mm-hmm. This is just my experience talking now. I'm not privy to the exact details on this, but you know, the window is not. MLS is still playing. He's still in the playoff roster. You know, I don't think the window's actually open yet, but you know, these things take some time. It'll take a couple of weeks. You remember, like with the Reggie deal, like I said, oh, this is about to happen, and then it took like 2 or 3 weeks to actually happen. This is the same sort of thing. You know, it's going to take a couple of weeks, maybe a month. You know, I think it'll be by the end of December that it'll be done. You know, the holidays are going to get in the way a little bit, but you know, and things can fall apart. I mean, knock on wood, for all we know, the guy's going to get hurt, and then what? But you know, if things progress as they should, this deal will come in somewhere in the next month, you know, in the neighborhood of $6-7 million, depending on how snotty FC Dallas gets and or how many other people come in with money too. Because as I said earlier, Juve apparently is pretty determined to get this guy. So they have a big checkbook, so we'll see what happens.
Speaking of checkbook, did anybody ever get a check from the season ticket holder deal for Reggie Cannon and or Chris Richards? Did FC Dallas ever cut anybody a check for those players?
I did not.
Dan, do we know?
I haven't had anything.
I think the last one was...
Did they just give up on that bit altogether quietly, hoping everybody'd forget it?
I think the last one was Mauro Diaz, but every time they sell somebody says, "Where's my check?" And then I don't think they send them out anymore.
Well, did they? But wait, did they ever get a check for selling Cobra or Nedyalkov? Or
no.
So, man, that would be so like this club if they just decided to quietly turn off that deal. Because it probably cost them more money to actually execute on it than anything else. The stamps alone probably exceeded anything that actually turned out in actual money back to the fan base.
Well, is anyone left there that remembers that deal other than Dan Hunt? And maybe he's not remembering it. I mean, Luzi left and Clavio left and Oscar left.
Didn't they start that? Gino was here when they started that program, right?
No.
Or was it prior to that? Was it even prior to that?
No, it was before.
Yeah, it was way back then because there were Diaz dollars for sure.
It was Castillo cash, so it was 2016.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, Castillo cash. Well, man, that would be really crummy. I mean, it wouldn't be. Look, if they wanted to end it, I don't think anybody would blame them. But they should come out and say, "Hey, guys, we're just not going to do this anymore."
Yeah, it's a bit while it lasted, I guess. You know, whatever.
Yeah, but you made a big effing deal out of the fact that it was kind of a cool idea too, wasn't it? Even if it was a stupid tiny amount of money. What was it, like $7 or something they got for any random? What was the largest amount anybody got in a check?
Oh, I think it was only a couple dollars. It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't much.
I hope somebody knows the answer to this because
I've never gotten one. I wasn't a season ticket holder back then.
wow. Well, maybe the fact that it hasn't happened and so many players have gone since then and nobody's brought it up. Maybe I'm making a bigger deal out of it than I should be, but
I mostly think it's funny.
well, you think about it. I don't remember what the percentages was, but if you start getting to $7 million and you've got
It was like 1% of 1%.
it was some tiny little amount of money, but if it's $7 million and a season ticket holder base of what, 3,000 people?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe it's 5. I don't know.
And you might get like lunch money out of it for
Yeah.
between Cannon and Reynolds.
Buy a beer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. So we'll set that aside. Maybe somebody listening to the pod can answer the
They
question
probably
for
also
us.
didn't like that just with basic math we could figure out what the figure was
How many
they received
season
and then
ticket
how
holders
much.
they
Well, that and how much they actually received from a deal when they, FC Dallas notoriously likes to keep things very
yeah.
quiet.
Yeah, but how did they not know that the minute they came up with the idea in the first place? I mean, it was pretty obvious. I mean, that's
Peter,
but
when was the
instantly
last
all
time
of-
FC Dallas thought anything through?
Okay, all right.
Wow.
All right, fair enough. Well, speaking of thinking things through, clearly Lucci did, because the guys go to Portland. I think we all universally predicted that they would not win this game. Although I did predict penalty kicks, although they didn't go exactly as I predicted. But Dallas does come home with a win, and they progress into the playoffs after getting to penalty kicks against Portland in what is one of the more impressive round of penalty kick taking I have seen in my life in any league at any level. They win that 8-7. And I don't know, guys, about how I feel about this because I certainly do not like or understand what Lucci is trying to do with this team. But you know what? I throw my hands up in the air and say it works, and I guess a win's a win, and we move on from there.
Yeah, we on this podcast we talked for 2 weeks about how this was going to be a defensive game plan. When you've never won at a place or won once or whatever it was, I don't remember going in, and you have 1 or 2 road wins all year. It's not surprising that you go in with a defensive game plan. Was it flawless? No. Did they need a little good bounces their way? Well, that's the way soccer works, right? I mean, at the end, it either works or it doesn't. In this case, it worked. So I predicted they would go to overtime, and I almost got it right with my Valeri game winner off the post.
You did.
In the last second.
Yes.
That would have been. I would have felt terrible. But
What was Dan's prediction?
Happily wrong.
Yeah.
What did you predict?
I said they'd go out, they'd go 2 up pretty early on, and it'd just be too much for FC Dallas to catch up on.
Okay. All right.
Well, yeah, I mean, defensive game plan. The only really surprise was because we even talked about Reynolds at left wing was that Barrios got dropped, which was a shocking development. I did ask around a little bit, and he's fine. Apparently, it's just coach's decision. So, definitely a defensive mentality and boring, and you don't like it, but it worked.
Yeah, but that's what I want to know. So the thinking is he drops Barrios because now he gets Fafa Pico and Ryan's Hollingshead playing those kind of those forward positions, but they're also noted for their defensive acumen, or at least effort. How about that? Their willingness to track back. And so that just gives them as much defensive posture and potential as possible in that lineup.
Yeah, Fafa's the best pressing winger on the team and one of the better ones in the league. And Ryan is obviously these days more of a defender than he is attacker. And also Ryan has an ability to come inside and combine. He's not necessarily like straight vertical. So there's ability to like play forward, if you're not looking to counter, which it seems like they weren't. He has an ability to play forward better in combination. So, I don't think the tactics were flawless. There definitely was a little bit of more passivity than I would have liked. They didn't keep the Timbers out of the box enough. There was too high a percentage of, I think it was like 60% of their shots were inside the penalty box. So that could have been better. It was not the flawless execution, but in the end, when you pick a game plan and you win, you got to give some credit for the plan working. And all the subs were great too. So, positive result.
Okay, but come on. This is one of those classic soccer games where one team essentially is playing very defensively and is clearly not the better side, and end up getting a win, and we all just look at each other and go, that's soccer, right, Dan?
It was MLS playoff soccer. What do you want from it? FC Dallas could go balls to the wall and get absolutely destroyed. As we've seen in the past. So, we talked about Lucci out-Lucciing himself, and he out-Luccied Savarese instead.
he did do that because as the game progressed on, and I don't mean to sound negative about a win, but it was not a performance. If this performance had happened in the middle of the season,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, look, there is no question in my mind that you can't look at this game and go, Jesus Ferreira was terrible, Ricarte was not very good, and you can sprinkle that across multiple players in this team because they only had 5 shots on goal, 1 in the first half. There was 1 at the beginning of the second half, and then they only had 3 in the second half, 1 at the beginning of the second half, and the second 2 didn't come until the 89th and 92nd minute. And then the last one was Hara's header in the 105th minute. And that's it.
Well, it's pretty clear over the back half of the season that when they play a team that likes to use a similar sort of style to this, in fact, which is sort of a mid-block and counter kind of look, which Portland likes that. They did it against Nashville because Nashville likes that. They did it at RSL because RSL likes that. Basically, they're trying to do to these other teams what they do to Dallas, because when those teams do that to Dallas and they try and Lucci ball, whether it's home or away, they cannot break those teams down. So they've, of late on the road, they've been using this philosophy, and I'm not surprised he stuck with it, because when you don't get any results on the road all year, and then you get 2 of them at the very end with the new philosophy, even if they do require a really outstanding goalkeeper effort, even if it does require some bounces going your way. I mean, you have to remember that Dallas has the second best defense in the Western Conference, and their offense stinks. Their offense is terrible. Yeah. So they're leaning into their strengths of a good defense and a quality goalkeeper, and it's not surprising. Now, of course, you need some breaks to win it. When you've won once at a place in a decade, you need breaks to win it no matter what happens, and that'll come up again here in a minute. But at the end, sometimes you just got to go with what you think is going to work. And we predicted Lucci would go this way, and he did, and it worked. It's not gorgeous, but they won. So
quick thing on this, right? We all believe FC Dallas could have won that game, but when push came to shove, we all said they wouldn't. You've got the Athletic did their MLS Cup playoff preview and didn't even mention FC Dallas. MLS didn't mention FC Dallas when talking about anyone. They said, hey, LAFC, Seattle, and Portland, they'll just cannibalize each other and leave it easy for SKC. Well, that obviously hasn't happened. If there was a star above the crest and not on it, we could probably style point that. But until that's the case, they just went out and got the job done. That's all anyone's ever been asking.
Yeah, and the thing that, and from my point of view, in terms of credit, was I found some of the substitutions very confusing. But man, when he finally got Tessman out on the field, Tanner had such a good positive game, and I was even really impressed by the limited amount of time we got from Tuamasi, who I couldn't figure out how he ended up playing center midfield on this team. But I'll be damned if it didn't work.
Yeah, Tuamasi was an interesting sub. And by the way, I agree about Tanner Tessman. He was so calm and so composed. His penalty was just ridiculous. His ability to relieve pressure with the outlet passes to the Y, which is where all of Dallas's attacking was coming from, was really a big part of them actually getting forward towards the end of the game. But the best I can come up, and we've had two chances to talk to Lucci since then. In the post game, there were 30 people, and he got 3 questions in. And then today, he was 15 minutes late, and there were 4 questions, and the first 3 were about Diego Maradona. So we haven't had a chance to talk to Lucci at all yet. So the best I can come up with is, if you're sitting in a mid block and trying to get out a team out of that block, Tuamasi is his attacking style is pretty vertical, pretty direct. So if and when he does get a chance to get forward, he's going to be better than, say, Brandon Cervania in terms of I'm going to explode forward into the box and get an opportunity. Brandon's more of a build kind of player. So that's my assumption in terms of why Tuamasi's in there. The other part of it was something Lucci mentioned today on the conference call. The one question he got asked about the game was that Brian Acosta injured his same injury, which, if you remember, is a hamstring. He re-injured it in the pregame warm-up in Portland. So while he was there and on the bench, technically, he wasn't actually available. And Lucci says that it'll be almost impossible to get him available for the Seattle game. So that limited his choices in terms of who could come in there, which is why it was Tanner and why it was Emma coming into the midfield.
Does it say something bad when I admit to you, when I saw all these subs going on, it never dawned on me that Acosta wasn't one of the ones being subbed on the field?
No, I mean, I noticed that the two DPs got left on the bench. You left Mascara and Acosta on the bench. Now we know Acosta's hurt. I was more worried actually that Acosta would start the next game. I'm glad to know he's hurt.
I do think it speaks volumes that for as kind of a slog as this game was, up until, the 85th minute when they finally subbed off Santos and Tessman is on there, Tuamase is on there, Ricardo Pepi has come on the field. Suddenly, all of this youth injected this new level of life and enthusiasm into the team that had been completely gone for 95% of the game. And I don't really know what to make of that as a fan of this team.
Well, my big takeaway is that when it really mattered, Lucci went back to play the kids. Lucci went where his bread and butter is. I think that's fascinating. And I think it says a lot about the DPs that are on this team and where they're valued in terms of their, there's a difference between it's in the middle of the season, I better give these DPs some playing time, then crunch time when it really mattered. It was like, you guys can stay on the bench.
All right. And Dan, I'll let you start with this answer. He played the entire game. He took his penalty kick, but how would you grade out Franco Jara's game in Portland Sunday night? Being the highest paid player on this team.
I mean, the thing is, we can, and no one's talked about the goal disallowed, which, you're paid to put yourself in the right places at the right times and take those shots. And, while it doesn't count on the stat sheet, he was, half a yard away from putting FC Dallas in the lead and on a very good move. I think really he just did a professional job. It wasn't a game where he was going to get a lot of chances. He had to drop back for the ball on occasion. He had to support defensively and just quietly got on with it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He put in a workmanlike effort. Now, my complaint about him would be that I don't think he's the right striker for this team, which is a entirely different conversation. But I think within the context of the game, I thought he put in as they would say, a good shift, quote unquote, and passed at a pretty good level and was able to help build out from time to time. The one play over the top, if he was faster, maybe he would have not been offsides and scored that. But that, again, that's about who he is and why did you sign him for what you signed him for, So
yeah, and guys like that become largely ineffective. And even Jesus, again, who I don't think played very well, I don't know how much blame you can put on either one of those guys because a component of the attack of this team is so reliant on fullbacks getting forward. And clearly Lucci had a lockdown on both. Nelson's never going to get forward too much to begin with. But Bryan Reynolds, I don't even know, did he pass half field more than once or twice up until very, very late in the game?
No, pretty much not. I mean, they definitely had asked him to be a stay-at-home defender until the goal happened. And then you could immediately tell they let him loose. And then he was going up and down the line gangbusters. So they obviously, again, that comes back again to credit to Bryan Reynolds when they asked him to play defensive, which doesn't look good at all for him in a game when all these clubs around the world are watching him, and he did it. And he played defensive and did a good job. And then when they told him to get forward, he went crazy. It's just...
it does make me wonder if Lucci does in fact deserve credit for this kind of bizarre master plan of sticking on the players he did, allowing this thing to kind of essentially rope a dope for 85 minutes, and then especially once they gave up the goal, to finally realize that okay, now's the time for me to unleash the Kraken with all the youth, and that was really the plan all along.
That's what I said the plan was going to be, was to try and kill the game as much as possible, and then you go for it at the very end. In this case, they went down a goal.
That's my point. Should he have opened the game up earlier? Did he wait only as long as he did because suddenly now he's down a goal? I guess is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen him go for it a little early, but with so little success on the road, he's just trying desperately to try and grind it out. So. It'll be interesting to see what he does on the next one. But, I do think he went a little bit too long. I would have liked to have seen him go a little bit earlier, but remember that particularly Brisson is susceptible to the counter, or Reto, either one at left.
And a couple of other
back.
Things in his
right,
his style of play.
Right. So and the Portland bread and butter is the counter. So it's like it's not a fast counter. It's a counter. It's a transitional counter. Like when you turn it over, they get it, then they go and they give it to their dangerous guys, and he kills you. Valeri being the guy. So when you're worried about that so much, their whole goal is to shut that idea down and give themselves a chance. And they did give themselves a chance. And I would like to have seen them go a little bit earlier than they did. But, it's hard to complain when they win, man. You win, you get credit.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because, not that Giovanni Savarese ever looks like he's got all of his mental acuity screwed together when he's standing on a sideline, but man, all of those sideline shots of him looking so confused and bewildered as to what was happening in front of him were kind of fun and delightful to watch.
Well, speaking of sideline demeanor, what do you guys think about how much Lucci talks? You could really hear it in this game.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably everybody that has a difference of opinion about that.
I don't have a particularly strong opinion about it other than I think it's his nature. I know when I was a player, not that I played at this level, God forbid. I just mean like when you play, a lot of times you block out all that noise from the sideline, so I'm not sure how much of it's getting through to guys.
I wonder if all of the kids are used to it because that's what they're used to coming out of a youth academy.
Yeah.
But all of the veteran players, like I have to assume people like Franco Jara and Ricarte and Acosta either have just completely tuned it out or are annoyed by it.
Well, I do think there's a larger percentage of it that's going towards the kids. You hear a lot of it for Brian and for Nelson and for Tanner. It's a lot of instructions to the younger guys a lot of times. But still, I mean, people are amazed. The fans on Twitter anyway are like, "Oh my gosh, he never shuts up." And I'm like, "Yeah, he's like that all the time."
Yeah.
Whenever we've seen him do that in the academy, it's individual instructions. It's not like trying to dictate everything to the team as a whole. Players aren't having to necessarily listen 90 minutes. They're able to concentrate on their roles, aside from those few minutes where they hear their name. It's it's not like a total distraction.
All right, so we do need to spend a definite quality set of time here on this episode of the podcast to throw some love to the guy that definitely deserves it more than anybody else from Sunday night. And that is the goalkeeper, Jimmy Maurer, who really just put on one of the club's finest performances on Sunday night through the entire 120 minutes. And you couldn't be more happy for a guy who's had a really outstanding season and gotten nowhere near the credit he largely deserves.
Yeah, let's talk about the fact that he had 7 saves, which is like the third most by a Dallas keeper in their franchise history in a playoff game. Mark Dodd had 12 once, which will tell you how good Mark Dodd was. But,
was that the Open Cup game?
No, it was in an MLS playoff game. I think it was in '96 where Dodd had 12. But that's still, 12 saves in a game is unbelievable. To do it in a playoff game just tells you how much they were getting crushed that game or whatever. But still, Jimmy was 7. And again, some people might point at Jimmy's having to have 7 saves. Well, again, he's one of your best players this year. You lean on your best players. He's a leader. Right. He had a huge performance. The penalty kicks, he was so close so many times. And the biggest thing to say about him in the penalty kicks was despite the fact that he didn't get some, he kept himself in it and he kept himself focused and he didn't lose it and was able to finally get one. How weird was it, by the way, in an empty stadium? It was very different. It was very easy for the kick takers. But he came up huge when it mattered and he made the big play when it mattered, and that's how you win games. So credit to him. They're going to have to give that guy a fat raise this winter to keep him around.
Sorry, you expected something from me.
I
don't know what.
Yeah, maybe.
Spot on. Just Jimmy did what Jimmy does. He's a leader from the back. Distribution in a place where they lose possession so easily. Well, losing possession is such a, it is the way that you lose those games. Having your goalkeeper being able to play out from the back and communicate effectively and really have good control over his box is It's such a great thing. The difficulty Dallas had was definitely they allowed far too many shots in the box, and that's where, Jimmy Mauer, not Maurer,
John Champion did not have his finest night.
Or,
did he?
yeah.
You could tell he's
Maurer.
never called a. He had never called a Dallas game before.
The best part was Pablo Mauer losing his shit on Twitter about it.
I don't know how you get Pepe wrong. It's
Pepe.
Yeah.
Pepe.
It's 4 letters. Pepe. I mean, come on. Traditional spelling.
Well, you know what? It is interesting, and I don't know for you guys, but watching both these teams go 8 rounds. How many rounds of penalty kicks was
8,
it?
yeah, 8.
Yeah, 8 rounds of penalty kicks, and all of them taken really well. Not to completely shift to a different game, but it really puts a strong emphasis on how amazing Tim Melia's performance for Sporting Kansas City was, and completely shutting out their opponent in that game with 3 very good saves. The way he reads the kick takers, I don't know if I've ever quite seen a goalkeeper do that to that level before. And it's not like it's the only time he's ever done it. He does it all the time.
Yeah, he only got beat once this year. He was 6 of 7 on the year. That's incredible. By the way, I have a bone to pick about all the PKs being good. Bresson's PK I thought was trash. And when he was doing the slow run up, I was like, oh,
he's going to blow it over the top.
That's still game's over. He's going to blow it. I thought for sure he was going to blow it. It was awful.
But
he got lucky. The keeper went and left in the middle open.
Well, that's not
wasn't
necessarily a
the most
bad plan.
Difficult shootout in a way. Both keepers are very much of a
Hope and a
mindset
prayer.
of I'm going one way or the other on everything. So everyone just rolls it down the middle.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, it was excitement galore, and always getting a win in Portland, even if the fans aren't there to cry and pout about it, is the log sawing even more annoying when there are no fans and it's just the chainsaw and Timber Joey going at it over there after they score a goal?
Oh, it was so loud and so dominating of attention. Usually it gets, as you say, it gets lost in the crowd noise and the general hum of the stadium. In this case, I was like, what in the, oh, yeah, that's right, Timber Joey.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so there they go. They win the game, tie it. Now, what we didn't talk about was the final sequence, because I guess we should talk a little bit about the game of inches component of it. You mentioned Diego Valeri's. I think he was trying to chip the ball to the far post for a header or somebody to do something with it, but it almost went in, and that would have been the most FC Dallas of ways to lose a game.
It would have been so perfectly FC Dallas. That's exactly the kind of thing that happens to this club over and over. Maybe we have a whole article about that, in fact. You can read about it. Yeah.
I don't know if it would have been more of an FC Dallas way to lose or more of a Diego Valeri way of winning a game.
Yeah, both.
Yeah, both things.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. And I still haven't been able to go back and get enough footage to watch the entire sequence to quite figure out why Matt Hedges is standing 10 yards deep into Portland's end of the field and Tanner Tessman is playing center back at this moment. But of the in the classic Hail Mary style, Hedges kind of dumps the ball deep, and there goes Ricardo Pepi, who had the wherewithal not only to take the shot, collect the ball and take the shot, but once he realizes it's saved and bangs off the post, he's right there to push it back into the old onion bag and tie the game 1-1.
Well, that's the old follow the shot, Dan. I'm sure you know as well as anybody. When you are in on net like that and you put a shot on goal, you don't turn away assuming it's going in. You follow it all the way.
Yeah, and Hedges' position, and that just comes down to that's part of playing that back 3 or back 5 is that the central centre back can attack the ball with one of the defensive midfielders dropping into cover. So the Philadelphia game at the start of the season, Bressan was doing that. That's actually how Paxton Pomaco's goal was created.
Have either one of you gone back and looked to figure out how or why Hedges? Because I can't remember. Had there been some sort of free kick or set play that had him far up the field leading up to that sequence?
I did not look, but Dan's right. That's actually an FC Dallas staple, is that the center backs take turns crashing like that, particularly on goal kicks. They do it quite a bit to try and hammer the ball back in. It's one of the reasons why Bresson gets burn like he does is because he's supposed to actually do that, but actually get the ball and not miss it. But
on a goal kick, you want to have Matt Hedges or Ryan Hollins head under that ball as well. So it's a perfect opportunity to get him into the midfield and to get that winner.
Well, the weird thing is that the swap is with Tanner, because Tanner, as a really tall guy, you'd think he would be involved in that kind of thing. But a lot of that probably is, a wisdom and experience and knowing how to fight and battle for those headers in midfield, I would imagine. But that's something you would think Tanner would be better at, further forward in his career probably.
Well, it turned out to be quite magical, and again, always let it happen in Portland. Anytime you get a win in Portland is a good evening, no matter how it happens. So kudos to the coach and the team for pulling that off. And now, Buzz, based on the results from last night, as Seattle gave it to an underhanded LAFC. The repeat happens. Dallas goes back up to the Northwest, has to face their demon yet again in the Seattle Sounders on Tuesday night at 8:30 Central Time next week.
Yeah. Well, here's the problem. FC Dallas all-time is 1-12-3 in Seattle. So you are talking about a team.
They weren't much better in Portland.
Yeah,
before.
It's the same thing. The only win was in May of 2011 when Breck Shea scored 18 minutes into the game. They won 1-0. But Seattle is the best defense in the West, only 23 goals allowed, and they're the third best offense in the West, 44 goals, which put them second behind Philly in goal differential in the whole league. Now, we saw that Philly just lost at home, so it can be done. They do have a win up there, so it can be done. But the question becomes the style that the opposition plays. Now, Seattle is not, in my opinion, they're not a sit deep and counter you team. Seattle wants to play. So can you withstand, an 80-minute, 90-minute sit deep against them? I don't know if you can withstand that. That you're likely to get beat 3 or 4-0 if you try and do that. My instinct is to put a guy in the midfield next to Santos with a double six kind of look, 2 holding midfielders basically. Somebody young like Tanner, for example. And I would have said Brian Acosta, just because it's Lucci and Brian Acosta, but the idea being to try and contain Ladero. If you put Tanner in there as a double six instead of Ricarte in that deep spot, and that would let you put Ricarte high and he could help relieve pressure. I think you have to try and bracket that part of the field, but I don't think you can sit deep. I think if you sit deep, you get wrecked. I'll try and dig out a little bit more as we go forward because the game's not till Tuesday about what Lucci might be thinking, but I don't like, in this game, I don't like the idea of going there and sitting deep. I think you get trashed. I think you have to try and play with them, which means like last year, you'll see, you might get a 4-3, but at least you're going to have a chance, I think, by trying to play. You have to sort of have the mentality you have at home, which is like they do against Sporting, because Sporting wants to play too. And Sporting's a good team. And this team this year, FC Dallas, they've had a pretty good run of playing against good teams that want to play. Dealing really well with Sporting is the big example. So I think their best chance is to try and play with Seattle, and as crazy as that sounds. So we'll see what Lucci does. I'm afraid that the end of this season grind has convinced Lucci that that's the way to go on the road. I just really think that's a bad idea against Seattle.
Now, do you think there's any chance he just throws out the same starting 11 from Sunday?
Chance, yeah, I think there's a chance. That goes back to the philosophy of when you win, you stick with what won, particularly if it's back-to-back road like this.
Which is something he's done quite a bit, by the way.
It is. But the difference is that the team you're playing is so different. It's not. I don't think Seattle's at all like Portland in my mind. Seattle tries to spread the field and create as much space as they can, and then they try and exploit. They move the ball around, try and exploit gaps on the run. I don't know that that'll. Maybe a low block fits into that. This is where it can be hard to read Lucci sometimes because he hasn't been around a lot, and he's still. I know we joke about this a lot. He is still learning, so he'll completely change his philosophy sometimes from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. So I do think there's a really good chance that it might be this end of the season relative success on the road. Everything's relative on the road.
Right.
that he'll stick with Nelson not left back and stick with Ryan on the wing and stick Fafa on the other wing and try and press that, try and not let them get forward, try and press, use that 6-6, probably Ricarte, try and contain Ladero a little bit. That's why I think Tanner would be so much better in there in that situation. But it's going to be, this is of all lineups at the end of the year, this one is actually, I find the most fascinating because of that idea that they can sometimes play up to the competition. So I'm actually really excited for it in that terms.
But Dan, based on all of the insane results we've seen over the last several days, I'm going to guess all of us are going to ask, at the end of this, we're all going to make a prediction that Dallas is not going to win in Seattle. But I don't know how we would ever feel comfortable doing that based on all the crazy. I mean, Nashville beat Toronto last night, of all things, which just seems totally insane.
Well, I mean, the East is a little easy to go crazy. It's kind of just it's not really the same standard as the West, unfortunately. Seattle's a weird one. Definitely don't take anything from their game against LAFC. LA were about as good as a USL team. They were missing 5 players. They were awful. At the back, it was embarrassing.
Well, it didn't help
and
when
they still could have tied it 3-3.
Well, and it didn't help when Carlos Vela missed with a penalty kick with easily one of the worst taken penalty kicks I've ever seen from somebody who is considered to be one of the best players in any league. Of that particular league.
Goalkeeper holding onto the ball, standing on 2 feet. That's pretty embarrassing.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
But between that, the Mark Anthony Kay header in the last minute, I mean, that terrible team could have got a result. The big thing for me is going to be you've got a really, really pacey front line. I mean, especially when you've got Jordan Morris running through. Matt Hedges physically saves that back line. There is no good option between Reto Ziegler or Bressan for dealing with Jordan Morris. So you've got to look at, do you bring Hollinshead into the back and then you forgo his place in the wing?
Oh, dear Lord.
That would be horrible. But for a physical matchup, is that something you do? Do you use like Tanner in that double pivot and you just have him kind of man marking half time? It's we're talking about defense is really going to forego the attack. So Portland's one place you can go there and you can say, okay, we're going to aim for the clean sheet. That's it. If we nick a goal, we nick a goal. If it goes penalties, Seattle, it's you have to go for the win, or as Oscar saw a few years ago, you bunker down, you lose 3-0.
I'm really looking forward to Bryan Reynolds versus Jordan Morris, actually. That's going to be a fun, young, attacking sort of matchup. Because Morris doesn't like to play a lot of defense. If you can outwork him and make him run up and down the field, that'll tire him out a little bit. So I think it'll actually be beneficial if they unleash Bryan and let him get forward and run and try and make Morris move up and down the field.
I wonder if they'll flip the wing and have Jovian Jones on the left so that they don't match up.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. Yeah. Because then you might have Nelson or Hollingshead trying to deal with Morris, which is not a matchup. Certainly not Ryan. If I'm going to go defensive, I wouldn't mind having Nelson over there to try and match up. But then that's not your go for it and try and play lineup. Ryan's your go for it and trying to play lineup. So
with the way he cuts inside as well, if you're going to exploit any space, you're looking at that space between Bressan and Nelson, ideally, or for them, ideally.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention about the Portland game, which will lead into the Seattle game, was, am I the only one that felt like Dallas looked like they were really tentative on the artificial turf of that stadium? There was a clear difference in how the players were handling themselves and the ball. Like every time I watched a Dallas player make a run and try to cut, it was always this kind of like very careful, slow turn while I was watching Portland players plan a leg, cut, and go the other direction. Playing on that stuff just has such a clear advantage to those guys.
Especially
and I'm assuming
when it's
that,
wet.
But especially when, and it was raining, and I'm assuming it's going to rain because it always rains in Seattle. That just is such a huge advantage for those teams. I don't know if you guys noticed that too.
Yeah, in a way, that might be a reason to play Tanner too, because the younger academy guys are used to training on that turf out there. They use those turf fields out past the normal field much more, and they even play games on them a lot more than FC Dallas does. So the youngest guys are the most used to turf. So put Tanner in there.
One thing is worth pointing out is that Lucci does use the fact that they do have the 3 turf fields. Oscar would never touch them. He absolutely hated even having them there. He wouldn't put players at risk as he saw it. Lucci will have the guys out there just to get the touch on turf. Obviously, they get the day before, they're training the day before, but actually, it was in Seattle a couple of years ago. Overnight, they poured a ton of the rubber crumb onto their turf field, which slows it down so much, and suddenly, what little comfort FC Dallas had on that field was lost.
All right, so Dallas goes back to Seattle, this scene of the crime from last week, and so many painful defeats. Yet once again, another opportunity. Tuesday night, 8:30 Central. And have they said what channel the game is on? No, it's on FS1. So they are saying that now, FS1. And if you're wondering in terms of betting lines, FC Dallas is plus 450 and Seattle is minus 154.
Sounds about right.
What's that in real money?
It means that Seattle's favored by a lot.
Yeah, that's a pretty big. But that's, listen, that's the thing Lucci was upset about last week. But you have to be honest with yourself when you're looking at the record at a place to play. You're looking at the fact that they're the much higher seed. That's a perfectly fair. It was perfectly fair that they were the underdog at Portland and no one expected them to win. No one's going to expect them to win this game either. But you know what? Thrive on that. Go into your locker room and tell everybody thinks you suck, and let's go prove them wrong.
I do wonder, and I think some of this is watered down by the fact that there are not fans in the stands. I do totally 100% believe part of what happened in Portland favored the fact that for Dallas at least, that Portland didn't have the Timbers Army behind them. That game probably ends differently if that place is its typical crazy European atmosphere.
Oh, there's no question. Yeah, no question.
But what then leads me to this question, which is I think we've all really enjoyed this single game knockout tournament style for MLS playoffs this year. And, there's been lots of chatter online if they should retain this moving forward, because certainly the value of having a home game will change the advantage for the home teams exponentially in a future set of playoffs if, in fact, they chose to do that instead of doing the home and away set system they've been doing.
Oh, man, I love it. I mean, look, there's no question that the more games that you have in a series, the more it favors the better team. That's why you have 7-game series in other sports. So if you have 2 games or 3 games, the better team is more likely to come out on top. That's what's so much fun about cup competitions. And this MLS playoff is the first time we're really seeing, I think, the crazy awesomeness of what a cup can be. And I hope they keep it. I mean, I hope the Open Cup turns into this too, but I hope they keep it because it's been so much fun to watch all these teams cratering and all the craziness, all the insanity of one individual game being everything.
It'd be weird if they changed it back. I mean, they made such a deal of changing it to this much better way that actually rewards home advantage, and then to say, well, the only chance we got to see it was with the bizarre Eastern Conference setup with COVID, so we're just going to go back to the old way now instead.
But wait, hold on. I just want to make sure the playoffs for this year was the normal setup until COVID.
No,
it was always going to be single game knockouts this year, even prior to the pandemic.
It was going to be top 7, 7th and 6th playoff for a playing game, and then misses the first proper round. It was kind of a weird setup, but it was all one game.
Really? Okay, I had forgotten that. For some reason, I thought the single game setup was a byproduct of COVID and trying to limit the number of games. I had forgotten they had set that up from the beginning anyway. Okay. Well, it is better, absolutely. Although I'm sure, look, I felt really bad for Toronto last night just simply because that's a team that's been essentially away the entire year, having to be away from their families playing here in the United States. And, man, that's a big ask for a team to have to go through that, especially playing a Nashville team that, has got its act together.
Yeah, I felt bad for Philly, who's been quote unquote the best team all year, and then now they're out because of the craziness of a 1-game knockout. But it's fun.
Well, that's also the supporter shield curse, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Well, it does set up some interesting conference semifinals. I think Sporting in Minnesota looks to be a really good game. Orlando, New England with Gill back looks like a completely different team. You got Bruce Arena running things. That's going to be a fascinating game. And Nashville and Columbus. Nashville is playing so well and so organized. And so unexpectedly to this level that's going to be a great game. And then Dallas and Seattle, you just don't know what. It'll either be a blowout or Dallas will turn it into a game like they did last year and make it super exciting.
Yeah, the biggest question is going to be which one of Nashville or Columbus gets to wear yellow. I mean, that's huge.
Well, I would assume Columbus because it's
Columbus
yellow,
will,
right?
yeah, probably because they're home field.
So have we all planned out the route to the inevitable FC Dallas hosting New England in MLS Cup, just to go with all of the US Open Cup finals and everything else?
Oh, it would be a lot of fun.
Somebody told me today that they said they had heard, and this is somebody that is within the organization, said that there is a running rumor that Toyota Stadium was still, at least as of a few weeks ago, was still being considered a location potentially for MLS Cup. And I wondered if maybe that was a plan B set up in case Toronto, or Montreal made it to the finals and they needed to play somewhere that wasn't in Canada.
Yeah, that would have made a lot of sense. I mean, it's a decent facility. It's not going to be busy because they don't do much else there except for, the D2 championship or whatever it is. That's not till May now. So
yeah. There's no chance that there's no chance they play MLS Cup anywhere other than the home stadium of an American, one of the U.S. based teams, right? Well, it has to be now. There's no Canadian teams left.
Well, it's not just there's no Canadian teams. It's like all the support that you'd have to take to it wouldn't be able to get in and out of Canada. I mean, it'd be impossible. Yeah. But I mean, now it's easy now. I mean, all Canadian teams are out. So
fascinating.
The only thing I could think of would be like, what if it's a team that has a 0 fans in the stands rule? And it's like, well, if we do it in Dallas, at least we can have.
Well, they're probably also looking for a backup plan just in case you get something like New Mexico had to shut down the other day.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's what it is.
Because now we've got the New Mexico Bowl's going to happen in Frisco as well as whatever the other bowl game is. Two crappy schools and whatever.
And then there was, on a weird day, because this is also the day that Diego Maradona died, and everybody's, revisiting that story, the Bryan Reynolds story, but also Dallas did another piece of business today, Buzz.
Yeah, I tried to slide this one in under the radar, under all the other news. They finally transferred Pablo Aranguiz to UD Chile. So, I mean, that was a thing that's been coming for a year. They've been saying all year long that they wanted to buy him. They were balking a little bit at the reported price of $1.5 million. They were trying to negotiate that down, and then he got hurt, and there's no way they were going to pay that. So they extended the window, and then they were trying to extend the loan, and then there was a report that they bought half his pass. The only thing we've ever gotten from FC Dallas was this tweet today in this very short article that says they've completed the transfer of Pablo Aranguiz to UD Chile, and we're not going to tell you anything else about it. Terms are not announced. So we have no idea if this half of his pass is real. I mean, it would make sense that might be a thing that could facilitate it. Like, Dallas, they love the sell on. So did they sell half of him and then let's let him go? And this way we can get a little bit more if they sell him to Europe or something, So unless we get some reporting out of South America with some details, all we're going to know is Aranguiz is gone. But he was never coming back here anyway. He kind of burned his bridges. When you go into the coaches and say, I don't want to be here anymore, send me home, they're never going to bring you back. You're done. So he was never coming back. In the end, they've just lost money on the guy. Even if you got back the transfer fee of, what was it, Dan, 1.25? Even if you got that back, you never had anybody that could cover his salary on these loans. So they've been eating part of his salary all along. It was kind of a bad deal in the end for Dallas, and just happy to see the back of that guy.
Yeah, I do think there's a lesson in the Pablo Aranguiz story for FC Dallas fans of just always being a little cautious and leery of. Let me put it this way: don't just assume anybody brings from a South American club as an attacking midfielder is just automatically going to be the next Mauro Diaz, because I get, that was kind of how everybody thought Aranguiz was going to turn out, right? He was Mauro Jr.
That's how they trumpeted him, but then they trumpeted Ricarte that way too. So,
well, yeah, they completely misrepresented Ricarte because he.
Well, look,
he wasn't. Ricarte is a good player. He just doesn't play the same position.
No. And we've hammered this club to death on the fact that their track record with foreign signings is not that great. Now, I have no idea what it is statistically compared to other teams, but they've had plenty of misses. So any kind of foreign player, whether it's South American or European, doesn't instantly make you good. You got to wait till they get here and see what they have. You might get a guy that might quit on you 30 minutes into the game, So Aranguiz, once Lucci took over and they changed to a system that doesn't use a pure 10, Aranguiz was cooked because he doesn't have the work rate and the tenacity to be a defensive free 8 or whatever we call Paxson these days, right? So he was hosed here anyway because it was false swing stuff was junk too. So it was never going to work, and he might as well be glad he's gone and let's move on.
It's a very typical FC Dallas low risk, high reward type signing. They've spent $1.25 million on him. 400 grand salary is not ideal, but it's whatever. It's not a massive amount of money that suddenly kills the roster build at all. It's so whatever they can get back for him, great. It's just nice to get rid of him and have that, not have to use any kind of roster relief or anything like that on him.
So the only other thing that took place this week that I personally enjoyed very much was tied to the insanity that took place on Saturday afternoon at Orlando and NYCFC. And if you don't know, it was a crazy story about the game went to penalties. And then there was a bunch of referee controversy tied to subbing players in and whether the penalty shoot system was over before they celebrated, blah, blah, blah. And all of that led to Buzz reacting to a tweet, I think from the league, mentioning the last time a field player had to step in for goal. Buzz said, hey, what player was it?
Chris Bondi, yeah.
Chris Bondi was like, hey, what about me? Because they had forgotten to mention Bondi. And then one of the most original and longest-standing Dallas fans of all time, Charlie, and everybody knows Charlie, she said, no, don't forget, Jason Kreis had to put on the gloves one time. And we all kind of looked at each other and went, I kind of remember that, but I don't. And then of all people in the world, Jason Kreis himself followed the tweet up and said, yep, it happened. It was a game against San Jose. I don't remember the year, but Dario Bros smoked me on the goal. And that turned into about a 5-hour crazy hunt for the information online, and we finally sourced it.
Yeah, it took a long time to figure out what game it was because there's not a lot of game stories left around from back in that neck of the woods. Basically, we just had to start looking for Dario Bros goals, and he didn't score very many, so that didn't seem to fit. And then it was like, well, maybe if it was a PK, maybe it was a shootout. So we finally found a game where, bizarrely, Matt Jordan had a red card, but the red card wasn't listed with like a minute mark. It was just listed as a red card. And that was like, oh, there we go. Maybe this is the one. And that's what turned out to happen was that Matt Jordan, because Dario Bros, this is my favorite part, he muffed it was just the old run-in shootout. He overran the ball and screwed it up. And it let Matt Jordan come out so high that when he saved the ball, he was outside the box. And it's a red card for a handball. So he was out. And that referee was instantly on top of it because Mark Dodd tried to run on and replace him. And he instantly said, no, you can't. And you could see in his mouth, it has to be somebody on the field. So I don't know why they came up with.
It was Reggie Ruddy, who was the referee at the time, and it was funny to see him immediately know the rule and go, no, you have to be a player on the field, which was a stark contrast to what had happened in the Orlando NYCFC game when Alan Chapman clearly didn't know the rule, or at least somebody was confusing him about it.
Well, they gave Jason Matt's jersey so that he would have a keeper jersey on, and then I guess Matt's gloves were taped because he couldn't get them off fast enough, so Dodd gave Jason his gloves. And so Jason puts those on. And the shirt, of course, is huge because Matt Jordan's a much bigger man than Jason Grice is. And he got a goal. He tried to do his best, and it was not very good. But it was great to have that interaction with Jason and hunt that down. And then El Jefe, our friend Dustin, has a lot of games on server, and you were able to find it and clip it for us. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that I have. Dustin was nice enough to give us access to his server. He's got games running from the original debut season all the way up till I can't remember. But yeah, there it was, and it happened. It took forever. Like, I was trying to source the information through Transfer Market, just looking at Dario Broza's scoring record, and I couldn't find a game that he had scored against Dallas except for a game earlier that year, but it was in the run of play, like in the 14th minute.
Yep.
And the way that MLS was keeping records of the old MLS shootout doesn't show up in those stats. So trying to find the game was really complicated. But then when I finally saw the video and just because there's so much great stuff in the video. And then I clipped a section of it, and it starts with I had forgotten about Treyes, that the guy with the dreadlocks that played forward for Dallas back in that year. I'd totally forgotten that guy. Do you remember him?
Yeah, JJ Treyes, yeah.
Yes, and then he does this beautiful run up in the shootout. He chips Cannon with this beautiful chip in the right before the issue, the incident with Matt Jordan and Bros happens, and there's all kinds of great stuff in there. So if you haven't seen it, go to Third Degree on the Twitter account and watch the video, because it's pretty classic stuff.
Yeah, it's a wonderful find. I love these historic moments, and it was sometimes we even are including this up. We're like, man, I completely forgotten that. It's once I saw it, I'm like, oh, right. But at the time, I was like, well, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's not in the media guide. The Chris Bondi is in the media guide as playing in goal for like a minute, and Hollingshead is in the media guide as playing in goal for a minute, because Jason's was the shootout. It doesn't register as him playing in the game. So he's not listed as having played for FC Dallas in goal when clearly he has.
Oh, the video is so great. Dave Durr is like clearly just cussing up a storm and throwing out some of the filthiest language. And there's that really interesting moment after the game is over when Leonel Alvarez kind of approaches the referees in the most Colombian necktie threatening manner you could possibly imagine. And Jason's just smiling and enjoying the whole thing, and it's so great. The other note is, I don't know if anybody noticed it. Did you notice how quickly? Because remember, Mark Dodd at this point had lost his position to Matt Jordan and was backing Matt Jordan up, and I seem to remember there was a bit of hard feelings about that. How quickly Mark magically appeared on the field as soon as they realized Jordan had been ejected from the game.
Yeah, he tried to get in, and the ref was like, not having any of that. No.
Yes. Mark wanted on that field in the worst possible way. So there's so much Dallas burned gold in that video. So go check that out. Dan, those were the good old days before you came stateside, my friend. You missed all the good stuff.
It was kind of funny. I had a newfound appreciation for really what we and all our colleagues do in the media. We were looking for different dates and stuff, and I was looking through the Dallas Morning News and Fort Worth Star-Telegram archives, and I was like, okay, the game was, I think you told me a date, and I looked that date, and I was like, that's weird, there's no mention of it this day. Next day, no mention. Day after that, no mention. 3 days later, oh, yeah, here's like a paragraph on the game 3 days before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those were the days.
Yeah, I went to training for a couple of years before another reporter showed up. It was like,
Yeah, if you think Dallas doesn't get a lot of local media coverage in 2020, just imagine what it was back in 1996, 97, 98, pre-turn of the century. It was dark days, as they say.
We wouldn't be here if it had been good. Third Degree wouldn't be here.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you largely started it because there just wasn't anything else.
There was nothing.
Yeah. There really wasn't much. I mean, it was interesting because the Dallas Morning News did have a full-time beat writer in Steve Davis up until the buyouts happened. I can't remember when the buyouts happened, and Steve left the paper and they got rid of the position. And Steve always obviously did a great job, but that was just one outlet. But the rest of the market really didn't cover the team very much.
Yeah, when I first started doing this, Keith Whitmore because the guy that did the Big 12 beat for a long time was doubling up on soccer. It wasn't Steve for some reason. And he was on it for like 2 seasons, and then Steve came back. When I know Steve did the World Cup and before that, like 94 and stuff. So, why we'd have to ask Steve someday why he wasn't on the FC Dallas beat for those 2 seasons. But I think it's Keith Whitmore, Kevin Whitmore, something like that.
Yeah.
He's a Big 12 guy.
It's kind of funny. I was looking back through all the archives for something I'm working on, and 95, like all the build up, so much coverage. Gets to 96. First game, tons of coverage. Second game, a little bit of coverage. Third game, nothing. And then you get like weeks where it'd be like the DMN does something. It would be like Steve Davis does something for the Dallas Morning News, or Tobias or Tilo does something for the Star Telegram. They never seem to both wouldn't cover the same thing in the same week almost. It's baffling the coverage here back then.
Yeah, it was definitely pretty sparse back in the day. All right, well, anything else we need to cover before we shut up shop for the evening?
Yeah, Thomas Roberts.
What is going on?
Well, he played in a first game. He played with the Hibernian reserves, Hibs reserve, against a team from the second division, and Hibs won 2-0. And Thomas scored the second goal, and then which was nice. And then Thursday,
Thomas Roberts scored against Stenhouse Muir.
Is that how you say that?
Yeah.
The team. So Thursday, he's joining Hibs' first team. So his progression and trials moving on, and he's moving up to the first team. And I think the first game was just to sort of get his legs going because he was in quarantine for 15 days. He had to do the full boat, by himself in a room. So, good start, and we'll see how it goes.
And just to kind of make sure everybody's temperature is set correctly, this is a trial. For him to be able to play over there, there's a whole issue with his passport situation and how he would qualify. It's not like he's close to signing a deal to go play in the Scottish Premier League or anything like that.
Well, no, they would have to decide they want him, and then he would have to decide if it was the right place for him too. It's just him exploring options. I don't know, but I imagine he will go a couple other places as well. He was not going to be in the plans for the playoffs with FC Dallas. This is done completely with their permission. They know that he's looking for an opportunity to play next year, and they're on board with that. So I hope he finds a good place that he can play a lot, because that's the key for him right now is to play a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Dan, thank you for your time this evening. Happy Thanksgiving, even if you're not going to celebrate it and you're just going to abstain from it.
Happy belated birthday and happy opening weekend of the Roja League.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. When does that start this weekend?
Saturday.
And they're playing that all over the city, right?
Yeah,
they're all over the Metroplex.
They'll be at Texas Wesleyan or Martin Field. They'll be at TWU in Denton. They'll be at Fort Worth Polytechnic all on Saturday, and then there's a bunch of other stuff going on every other weekend. And
that's made up of Denton Diablos, Iniasetes, and who else is playing in the tournament?
They got Fort Worth Vaqueros. Diablos has that Estudiantes team that actually won it last time.
Which is their junior team, isn't it?
Yes, a team completely made of college kids.
Okay.
They'll have Premier Legends, which is the team that another college team, I think is Jesus Ferreira and Charlie Kelman played for him briefly in the summers. Foro, which is Michelle's team, they've got a really solid roster. A lot of, if you want to see who's likely to not be with North Texas SC, you should probably watch their games. And FC Harrington and Irving FC is the last one.
Irving FC.
Yeah, they moved up to the NPSL. Irving FC is, so that's a step up.
I'm surprised Riados aren't participating in this.
They were asked to. I don't know any details why they're not, but they were offered a spot again, of course, because they were in the first one.
Because I don't think they're playing in NTPSA anymore.
It may have been being able to field players. It could be as simple as that.
A couple of their players do appear on the rosters, so maybe they're just throwing everything into Open Cup.
And so, if people want to attend these games, they can.
Oh yeah, each game's capped at about 250 people. They're using the full. Protocols for COVID, masks are required. You have to sit spread out. Some of the games have food and drink, and some of them are BYOB. It just depends on the game, but you can get tickets to all of them on their Roja League website.
And I do want to throw this out here because I thought it was the strangest story. The news that the Sidekicks cut a deal with Channel 21 to broadcast some of their games this season. What else do we know about that? Because that completely seems out of the blue.
Yeah, John did a story. It's on our blog about it. They're doing 8 home games, and the idea was that because they have limited attendance, they wanted people to be able, that are normal fans that would go, to sort of connect with the home team, and probably try and show off some of the play and some of their atmosphere. Since they're putting on these games, you might also try and get it on. And then all their games, of course, are online, but there's going to be 8 of them on TXA 21.
Interesting. And also, if you anybody listening to the pod and you didn't read John's story about the Sidekicks and the bizarre situation tied to their coach and the fact that he's kind of a co-owner and the downfall of the brand and just how bad the team has been over the last few years and how much that's tied to that guy, it's a fascinating read, and it's one of the most insane soccer stories anywhere about a beloved brand, which the Sidekicks most certainly are in this area.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that sometimes when you talk about pro soccer, they'll ask me if I mean the Sidekicks in terms of even FC Dallas, because that brand still resonates across this city.
For sure. All right, but once again, Dan, thank you so much for your time today. Just hope you avoid Thanksgiving as best you can, because I know it probably makes you itch or something like that.
Nah, not really. I mean, you just do what we do for Christmas, so it's great. I get 2 Christmases.
Okay, fair enough. And well, thank you, and enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday. And Buzz, thank you. Congratulations on the big scoop today, the Bryan Reynolds news. You were the guy that broke it, and everybody else had to follow. So kudos to you on that.
Thank you, sir. And once again, everybody, if you like the work we're doing, please support us. Patreon.com/thirddegree.
So yes, thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan, and we'll speak to you next week after another win or potentially the end of the season on another fun-filled edition of Third Degree, the podcast.
Doubt them.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.